today is Word Project 3. We're going to create a high school resume. Let's see what we have in store here. Okay, if you see red text, that means stop. You need to take some notes. Green text means go. It's time for you to actually go and do something. And black or white text means read it and learn it. All right, so here we're going to do with part 1, what is a resume and why do you need one? What is a resume? Well, it's a brief account of one's professional or work experience and qualifications, often submitted with an employment application. Or, as I like to say, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that summarizes what you can do and what you have done in high school in order to get a job, an internship, a scholarship in college, etc. And it's also your chance to brag about yourself. Normally it's bad to brag about yourself. Normally I don't like people who brag. But when it comes to a resume, that is the perfect time to brag about yourself, and people expect you to brag about yourself in a resume, so do that. All right, here are the uses for a resume. When you go to get a job, one of the first things you'll do is turn in a resume or and a letter that goes along with it, but you turn that in for a job. Sometimes for a lower level job, you'll just have an application, but it's probably a good idea to actually turn in your application filled out, but also with a resume attached to it, because a standard application doesn't give you very much opportunity to talk about yourself, whereas a resume, you can brag about yourself a little bit. So if somebody just turns in an application, but you turn in both an application and a resume, you might have the edge and get the job. If there's a place you want to work, let's say that you like Deo and you want to work at Deo, but they're not posting for a job, well, you could just go in and approach the owner or whoever's managing or working there and say that you want a job. And if they say, well, I'm not sure if there's a job available, you can present them with your resume, and there's a chance that they'll hang on to that for when a job opening appears. Okay. All right, here's a scenario. Let's say that you go in you turn in a resume. Let's say you're older and you're trying to get a job for your career. You turn in a resume, and whoever has to read all those resumes and who's in the charge of hiring that person, they're probably going to get like 100 or 1,000 resumes, and yours is just one there. Okay, so the deal is if there's 1,000 resumes, are they going to really want to read through those resumes, or are they going to try to get rid of resumes? And the answer is they're going to try to get rid of resumes. And so what you have to do is make your resume stand out so they can read like the first 3 lines and they're interested, and yours goes into the keep pile and not in the throwaway pile. Okay, so that's one of the jobs of a resume, is to quickly get a potential employer's interest. All right, here's a purpose. The purpose of a resume is to write this part down, just the red, help you organize your thoughts. You're trying to figure out, hey, here's a job. What skills do I have in order to get that job? So recognize your skills and interests, and maybe through the process of writing a resume, you might even realize, like, oh, I don't really want that job anymore because it doesn't really include my skills and interests. Maybe I'll go for a different job. Recognize your weaknesses. It's kind of important to know what your weaknesses are so that you can improve upon those areas. So, for example, if you know, like, oh man, I have done no volunteer work, well then, now you can make educated choices for your activities, what high school classes you're going to take, what college you want to go to, and so on and so forth. So you can see your weaknesses and then also do this. All right, it'll prepare you for college applications. Going through the process of the resume is going to help you understand your skills, interests, abilities, what you've done, and it'll make other applications in the future easier. Write this down. The purpose of a resume is to present you in the best light and convince the employer that you have what it takes to be successful in this new position or career. And honestly, the real thing you want to get is an interview. So basically, when you're trying to get a real job, you're going to turn in a resume, and the hope is that you're going to get called in for an interview. So that's really the purpose, is to be interesting enough to get you an interview. Okay, part 2, understanding the resume types. We're going to talk about 3 different types of resume. We're going to talk about the chronological, the functional, and combined targeted. All right, the chronological is just like the name sounds. It puts things in chronological order. You put it down in the time that happened from, okay, this happened first, this happened second, this happened last. This is a classic style of resume, kind of an older style. You're going to use this for college applications most likely. You're going to also use it for certain jobs. A conservative field or certain employers are going to want this traditional style of resume. Okay, so it's a complete presentation, I should say, of your qualifications in order from the beginning to the end. It's easy to understand what you did in what job, because you list, I did this job, I did this thing, I did this next job, I did this thing. So it's easy to follow for the employer. That's an advantage. The disadvantage is that it is much more difficult to highlight what you do best. So you don't really get a chance to brag as much as you like and talk about things that you are really good at. So let's take a look at an example of a chronological resume. And I'm being patient here. It's going to open eventually. Okay, so here's our example of a chronological resume. Okay, let's make this big. Let's make this bigger. Okay, so basically here's kind of a generic version of it. But basically you say, my objective, I want to get a job as a manager, and then you list your experience in order. So here's, I worked at this place and I did this from here to here, and then you go, actually you do it, so you do it from the newest to the oldest. So you can just see that this guy listed, I worked here, I worked here, I worked here, and then education and interests. Okay, so but not a lot of chance to talk about like, hey, I'm really good at this, I'm really good at that. Okay. All right, what is a chronological resume and when should it be used? What are its advantages and disadvantages, and how can you tell that the resume that I just showed you is a chronological resume? Answer those questions. Okay, the next type is a functional. We're not going to talk about this too much because you won't use it because it requires a lot of experience. A functional resume highlights your major skills and accomplishments from the very beginning. Okay, it helps target the resume into a new direction or field. So basically, if you're switching from like one type of job to another, and if you listed what you've done, it's like your employer won't be impressed. It's like, oh, he did this job, but it doesn't relate. He did this job, but it doesn't relate. And so if you're switching job fields, a functional is helpful because instead of listing jobs, you list what you can do. Okay. The advantage is it will help you most in reaching for a new goal or direction. So when you're switching jobs, a disadvantage, it's hard for the employer to know exactly what you did in what job. Okay, so here's an example of a functional. So if you look at this, he doesn't list exactly where he worked, but he just lists, here's what I can do, here's what I can do, here's my accomplishments. Okay, and so you can take a look that, so it's handy in that you get to list everything you're good at. An employer might look at it and think, well, what jobs did he work in? Where did he get all this experience? Okay. So what is a functional resume and when should it be used? What are its advantages and disadvantages? How can you tell that the resume that I just showed you is a functional resume? Okay, now this is the kind we're going to actually use. This is the important one for us, targeted or combined. This is going to be great for students like you, or maybe this may not be good for you, but it's great for students who may have little job experience. So you can do stuff, you have skills, but you just haven't had very many jobs in your life. Okay, it's good because like the functional, you can list your skills. Okay, it allows you to highlight the skills and experiences that you want to show a potential employer, includes elements of both. So it's combined because it's a little bit like the chronological and it's a little bit like the functional. Okay, so you get to list your skills and experiences, and you also get to list your jobs. Also, the reason it's called a targeted or combined is you really target it to a specific job. You basically say, here's the exact job I want, and here's why I'm good for this exact job. Okay, the advantage is to maximize the advantage of both kinds of resume, both the functional and the chronological. Okay, it can be longer because it does both. It can be longer. Okay, let's take a look at an example of one. This is what a student actually did one year. I thought she did a good job, so I'm using it. I changed her name. You can probably figure out what her name is if you look at it. But anyway, here's what she did. So look at a couple things. Right at the very get-go, look what she writes about herself. She doesn't write about a job, but she writes about what she's good at. Exceptional writer and editor who successfully manages and prepares large written projects for publication. Background includes newspaper production, magazine production, editing, and 7 years of web design. All right. Anyway, so she brags about herself right at the beginning, and then look how it's targeted to a very specific job. Objective: to get an editorial position in an organization where communication skills and a desire to work with the public would be needed. Notice also that she's bragging about herself, but notice that she talks to the employer about, here's what I can do for you. I want an editorial position, but it's where I'm really good at working with the public. So if you need somebody who can work with the public, I'm the person for you. Okay, here's the profile. lists more things that are good that she's good at, and then next she lists experience. So then she says, okay, I worked here, here's some activities I've had, here's my education. So you can see that it's a combination of the two styles. Okay, answer these questions. Okay, all right, so research shows that only one interview is granted for every 200 resumes received by the average employer. Okay. Research also tells us that your resume will be just looked at quickly. Okay, they're going to glance over it real quick. They're not going to read it in depth, so they're going to spend 10 to 20 seconds. That's all the time you have to persuade them that you're the person. Okay, so with that in mind, answer these questions. How much time will the employer probably spend reading your resume? And what should you do as a response to the above question? Answer those questions. Okay, and the answer should be, for the last one, what should you do? The answer should be, because somebody's only going to spend 10 or 20 seconds, you should put your best stuff right at the top. Okay, and you should target it right for that particular job. You should put stuff right at the top telling them, hey, for this particular job, here's why I'm the best person for the job. Okay? And that's it for now. Go on to the next spiel will be part 3.